Hey, it's me, WWE Hall of Famer from the LOD, Road Warrior Animal. And who are you?
Yeah, I gotta do this when? Now? I'm watching a match. What is now? Now is, oh, now. Yeah. Thanks. Hey, this is the Pharaoh from Monty and the Pharaoh. I just want to say thank you to our subscribers as we now have hit the 10,000 plateau. Thank you to all our subscribers out there. But I'm going to ask our subscribers to take the next step for us and become a full-fledged YouTube Monty and the Pharaoh member. Yes, that's right, folks. You can check it out. We've got 3 different levels. There's free shirts. There's free autographs. There's all sorts of perks for our members. There is nothing more we enjoy than giving you this program. And to do that, we need your support, and we appreciate your support. This is Jimmy Pharaoh, and don't forget to check out Monty and the Pharaoh every Thursday from Indie Music TV and on Cablevision here locally in New York. Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monty and the Pharaoh. Later. Is that good enough for you? Can I finish this? Lesnar's killing him. I'm pissed.
All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monty and the Pharaoh, only seen here out of Indie Music TV, out of Ronkonkoma, New York, usually on a Thursday show, but we have a special show today with wrestling icon Jules Strongbow. But before that, the Pharaoh and I decided to do an extra show out there for the fans where we're going to discuss the history of the WWE Tag Team titles. So, at the board is Matty Ice, who we dragged out of the beautiful sunshine in New York, which we haven't had recently. And you went paintballing today, brother?
Unfortunately not. Since it rained yesterday, it was too muddy to go paintballing this morning.
Ah.
So we just went bowling.
Isn't that so you went bowling?
Yeah.
How do you bowl? Are you a good bowler?
Yeah, I'm a straight bowler.
Like what?
I get like 140.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
What does a straight bowler mean? You don't get crocked when you bowl?
Yeah, no, you know what? People like fucking like twist their balls.
Yeah,
and,
so he's like
Oh.
a straight bowler.
I just chuck it straight.
You just throw.
Yeah.
No science involved.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Just throw it inside.
And
No.
for our upcoming show in a couple of weeks, Chris Multier sent us his 2 books, The Job Man. So me and Jimmy have some reading to do. So we want to talk about that next Thursday. But anyway, to the right is the star of the show, Mr. Jimmy Pharaoh. Jimmy, how are you, bud?
Good morning. It's not Thursday, but we are here.
And yeah, did you get some rest today at least?
Yeah,
A little bit. You gonna get your drink on tonight?
Yeah, I probably should have gotten my drink on before I got here, but yeah, yeah, probably.
So last Thursday we were up against the Dark Side of the Ring. I haven't seen it yet, but the Grizzly Smith interview.
Okay.
Not interview, but the Grizzly Smith show. So if anyone doesn't know who Grizzly Smith was, he was a wrestler back in the 60s and early 70s.
Yeah, back in the day.
Who later became a booker for the WWE and some other wrestling federations.
Right.
Also well known as he's the father of Jake the Snake Roberts.
Mm-hmm. Rockin' Robin?
Rockin' Robin, thank you.
Right.
And
Isn't there a fellow out in
what's
Texas,
his name?
that Houston guy?
Sam Houston.
There you go.
Mr. I Need a Sandwich. So from what I understand is this is pretty telling about the sexual abuse that Mr. Smith had put on his family.
Okay.
But we're not really going to talk about that today.
Yeah, I'm
We're
not exactly running to hear about that one, but I could see why people would.
But we do want to celebrate our friend. Well, not really, but our friend and yours, rock and roll Buck Zumhofe is now spending his
better reword
seventh year in jail.
Yeah.
Buck Zumhofe, rock and roll Zumhofe, was sentenced to 25 years in prison. He's now, I think, almost 67 years old. Where unfortunately,
he's going to expire in there.
Hannibal on his channel reported that he was sentenced just recently, but didn't realize it was from 2014.
Right.
But anyway, Buck Zumhofe, the reason I bring it up is coming off that Dark Side of the Ring was another racist, not racist, but a child abuser.
He's a molester.
What do you remember of rock and roll Buck Zumhofe?
I remember the radio that he had. He carried the Walkman like we used to carry back in high school. That's what I remember about the guy. We didn't get to see much of him. He was AWA, wasn't he?
Yep.
You know, like, wasn't he? I think he might have competed at Wrestle Rock. I might have seen him on, like, the...
He was in the WWE for a cup of coffee.
Was he there for a cup of coffee? It must have been a cold cup of coffee. I don't really remember much. But,
well, I'll tell you what... Rotten hell.
Yeah, what a
rock and roll Buck Zumhofe.
Yeah, what a scumbag, man. Sorry, you know, who's judging? This speaks for itself.
I would like to thank the band Wisteria Hall, who sings the theme song for the Monty and the Pharaoh show. Wisteria Hall is led by Jimmy Farrell, along with his partner Bart Griggs. Wisteria Hall sings such great songs as In My Dream, This Life, Not Far Behind, and Here Comes the Rain. Get their music on Spotify and iTunes and Reverb Nation. We were just talking about your band today, Jimmy, and how I feel it's one incredible band.
Yeah, I appreciate that. We put a lot of work into those tunes.
You know, it's funny in today's society, it's like sometimes some real gold slips through the cracks. It's a little bit disappointing.
Hey, well, you know, growing up, I used to watch the Uncle Floyd show on UHF, and I thought he was wonderful and special, and I remember you scratching your head a little bit like, what are you watching?
This is true.
And then he wound up on NBC, so there was something there in those
Let's
little
not forget, he had a little band that was coming up from New Jersey that no one knew on his show. I do remember that episode.
Bon Jovi?
Bon Jovi.
Yeah, he also had David Bowie and John Lennon were huge fans of his too, by the way, and said so back in the day.
Did they go on a show?
The Ramones did.
Well,
before anybody knew who the Ramones were.
There you go.
Blue Oyster Cult did.
There you
before
go.
Anybody who knew who really,
big names.
Well, actually, Blue Oyster Cult was big time in the 70s, so I can't say that. They rule. I love Blue Oyster Cult.
All right, well, if you didn't know it, you are watching Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monty Nefaro, only seen here out of Indie Music TV. Catch Monty Nefaro on the Monty Nefaro YouTube page and Monty Nefaro Facebook Live page. Hear us on iHeartRadio, Spotify, Anchor, and catch us on Twitch TV, the Monty Nefaro page. And if you live in New York, you could catch us on New York Cable on Channel 15 every Tuesday from 7 to 7:30, and for early risers, 6 a.m. to 6:30, and on Channel 20 on Friday, 2 a.m. to 2:30. We'll be right back after this commercial break with the history of the WWF, and WWE Tag Team titles.
Tag, you're it. See you in a sec.
The Monty and the Pharaoh Show is brought to you by...
Because wine is your second favorite four-letter word. California wine, New York attitude. Good fucking wine.
Yeah.
You want to star in your own success? Call QuickCast, www.quickcast.com, 866-7-CAST-NOW. That's 866-7-CAST-NOW. QuickCast.
Star in your own success.
Oh, what's up, Mike?
Hey, Jimmy, what's going on?
Yeah, nothing much.
You know, Jimmy, I love this country.
Oh.
I love to buy Made in America material. And I love to buy my artwork at TAG, T-A-A-G, Made in America, 14 East Broadway, Port Jefferson, New York, 11717. The shop at the corner. All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monty Nefaro, only seen here out of Indie Music TV. And today's special Saturday show is about the history of the WWE Tag Team titles, WWF Tag Team titles, WWF Tag Team titles. We're saying it's all the same. We did have a show a couple of months ago, the history of the Intercontinental title, which was a fantastic show.
That was a blast.
This one seemed to be a little more difficult.
Yeah, it was. Folks, this title was created technically on June 3rd, 1971. So, of course, we are now celebrating 50 years of this belt. It has undergone a billion title changes. I think what made it harder for us is that the fact that the tag team belts, you think other belts get passed around like hotcakes? The tag team titles get passed around even more than any other belt as far as the total amount of champions and the total count and what we had to decipher through to figure out where we were going to go with all of this. Don't quote me, but you know what? And I'm not looking at a computer. I just throwing it off the top of my head. I think the very first champions were Tarzan Tyler and Luke Graham. I
think,
could be wrong.
No, I think you hit it on the head.
But I think I'm close. You know,
Yep.
I remember for some reason those two, their names stuck out years back when I looked at this list. I haven't looked at the list in 1,000 years, but I believe that they might have been the first champions. Tag team wrestling, as I said, evolved over the years. It became much more hotcake situation in the Attitude Era, as we'll get to a little bit later.
Absolutely.
But, Mike, over the years, there's been some pretty amazing tag team specialists of sorts. You gotta.
Before we go to what we feel are the history a little bit, I want to give some recognition.
Yeah.
Mr. Fuji held the tag team titles 5 times.
Right.
For a total of 932 days.
Mr. Fuji, to me, is the probably early pioneer, along with another team we'll get to, and I don't want to start giving everything away, but he was a rock for tag team wrestling in the WWF and then the WWF in the 70s and into the mid-80s. Mr. Fuji was amazing. Who's next?
You've got Billy Gunn holding the title 10 times for 916 days.
Yeah.
Now, we got to understand something,
Yeah.
right? The 70s, 80s, 90s,
Right.
2000s, and beyond, the game changed. We had the same problem with the Intercontinental title,
Sure,
right?
the game changed.
Guys
sure.
held it for a longer time, which
Right.
I enjoyed much better,
Right.
actually.
Right.
So things do get skewed.
I'll tell you, though, it is comforting to see an old-school legend like Mr. Fuji. Sure, it spells out that he had 5 reigns in 932 days, and it spells out the way tag team belts would change all the time in the Attitude Era. To comparing Fuji's 5 reigns, 932, to Billy Gunn's 10 reigns, I am relieved to see that Billy Gunn had 916 days.
Right.
So it doesn't mean that.
And again, both
you know,
superior tag team specialists within the WWF
absolutely.
are E, right?
Who do we have at 3 and 4? I think we could pair these up for Matty
You've got
to throw up there.
Axe and Smash.
There you go. Good
They've
old
held the belt
Demolition.
3 times for 398
Actually,
days.
698
698 days, yeah.
You got to throw the other 300 days on there. You know, or is it 350 days?
No, that's terrible.
300's better. Okay.
And then after that, you've got Tony Gurria.
How about Johnny Valiant? We skipped Johnny
Oh,
Valiant.
you got John. Well, I purposely skipped Johnny Valiant.
yeah,
2
well,
times for 600
What's your
days.
problem with Johnny Valiant? You thought he was a girl the first time you looked at him.
Well, we'll get into that, but
Yeah.
that's I'm
There
just
you
not
go.
a big fan.
Yeah.
Not a
Tony-
big fan of him or his friends.
Tony, oh my God. Oh boy, you're like school on Christmas vacation. Now class. All right, Tony Gurria. How about that? We got that one up there. Tony Gurria.
So Tony Gurria,
You know.
very important for me, right? Because
Sure,
that's
for
when
me
I first
too.
started getting into wrestling.
Sure.
Tony Gurria, Rick Martel, big deal.
I remember him
right?
with Zbyszko being champions, world champions.
So, I mean, look, man, the list goes on and on and on. But I think it's important if we're going to discuss the history of the WWE tag team titles,
Right.
we should start off in the 70s, Jimmy. Go ahead.
All right. Well, during the 1970s, you can really look at 2 specific teams, in my opinion. Professor Toro Tanaka and Mr. Fuji, who held the belts, I think, 3 times over that time period during the 70s, and it was spaced out over several years. And you've got the Valiants. And the Valiants, to me, were pre-Freebird, if you will.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean? They were a sexy name. They were like something I heard other people, like adults, talking about. When they would talk about wrestling, I would hear about the Valiants. So the Valiants clearly had an it factor going on back then. I'm sure there's other teams that we could mention during the 70s. You know, like in the later 70s, Tony Gurria started to become
Tanaka and
you know,
Fuji.
well, as I already said, Tanaka and Fuji. Tanaka and Fuji carried the 70s along with the Valiants. You know, so
Jimmy takes this really seriously, as I do, and we had a discussion, and there was a point where we were talking about the Freebirds, who obviously were in the WWE for a very small cup of coffee.
Right. Otherwise, they would have been put in consideration if they had done something. But to me,
we talked about factions.
Right. To me,
so
they were a
the
faction.
question was,
right.
You'll see that the Valiants will be on Jimmy and my top 10 greatest
spoiler alert?
Well,
what are you doing?
You know, that's
oh boy,
you know.
Oh my God.
But the issue we had with it is Jimmy, as we were talking about the Freebirds, didn't feel, and say differently, is you didn't feel a faction deserved to be recognized as a tag team
unless they're forced into the equation, like Vince putting a strap on a situation like that and having them hold a title for multiple times and long times. You know, that's. But we'll get to that situation later too.
I mean, here was
the
the
Freebirds, like you said, had a cup of coffee with Vince, so they're not in consideration here. Again, if they had been given multiple reigns with Vince and had a long historic title reign or whatever, then I have to be forced because that's what Vince, he forced it in.
Here were one of the great things about the 70s, though. The wrestler that was not, a high-level wrestler, like a mid-carder.
Yeah.
In some cases, WWE would always put a tag team title
Dominic
on.
Dominic had a great time during
right?
the 70s. Baron McKelsick
Luna.
The WWF
Absolutely.
WWF tag team title.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, that made the 70s and 80s wrestling a little more special.
Give
to
an
me.
honorable mention to the Executioners during the 70s.
Absolutely. By the way, I saw real quick. I guess Russell's put. I want to make sure. Russell Campbell says, "How could we look over the LOD, Rock and Roll Express, so on?" Got to always remember, guys. Some of we're talking about the WWE.
Right. We're not doing WCW.
I'm looking for a
Maybe
comment.
We will someday,
I'm looking.
We're not doing NWA, WCW, AWA.
Right.
You could start mentioning the High Flyers.
Absolutely.
Bronzell. We're doing the WWFE title, which was created in '71, and they're celebrating the 50th anniversary.
Absolutely.
Of it. That's why we're doing this. So it's
another thing. No, this is. Again,
well, actually, that's not why.
Thank you. Do not say that.
First,
that's
and then
right.
Everybody else jumped on
this
it. This
is part
true.
of the Monty and the Pharaoh setup. So that is totally
so
true.
This was in the works for
and all of a
weeks.
sudden WWE. But I want to run this by you before we continue on.
Yeah.
Russell Campbell puts Meltzer had the gall to say the Young Bucks, Jericho and Sammy Guevara are the best two tag teams of all time. Could you believe, if that's true, Russell, I want to throw up in my mouth.
Listen, Meltzer, you know what? You know who gives people, what gives Meltzer power? People who listen to him. He has no power over me. His opinions mean nothing to me. Next. That's how I feel about Meltzer. Give me some seltzer. Oy. Please, give me a break. Give me a break.
And Russell says he wasn't talking about the WWE. He was talking about what Dave Meltzer wrote. I appreciate that.
Yeah, okay.
Because I got to tell you, Dave Meltzer's an asshole. I mean, if you just want to get pops, you're crazy.
He's just so filled with
bias. So, if I was to ask you, Jimmy, in your mind of the 70s, give me three of the teams that influenced 70s
Tanaka
WWE
and Fuji,
tag team champions.
The Valiants first, Tanaka and Fuji. I think of the Executioners for some reason.
There's nothing wrong with that.
That's who I think of. But, I'm sure that there's other teams. Someone's jumping up and down, Haystacks Calhoun and Tony Garea. Tony Garea and Larry Zbyszko.
You're right.
So, Irish Pat Barrett with Dominic DeNucci.
I think you're right. I think I can't really argue with those three teams at all.
Those are the ones I remember the most.
I mean, if you want to throw the Blackjacks in there.
Okay.
All right, but you know what? Definitely Valiants,
I think the
Fuji, and Tanaka.
Especially who was under those masks.
Absolutely, very cool in the end.
We're talking about Studd and Kowalski, aren't we?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to go with them.
Let's talk about the 80s.
Yeah.
80s tag team wrestling. I think that's when maybe tag team wrestling came into its own.
Yeah. It's definitely when it joined the big-time show. For sure. In the first half of the 80s, it was the warm-up to the big-time show. And yes, I'm alluding to WrestleMania and all that followed after WrestleMania.
Sure.
But the teams, to me, that carried the first half of the decade are, here's Mr. Fuji again with Mr. Saito.
Right.
Absolutely. Remember that time they won the belts and held on to it forever?
I want to give a pop to C.J. Duncan, mention Tito Santana, Ivan
Absolutely.
Paduski.
Ivan, I'm not going to lose Paduski.
There you go.
Yep, sure, I remember them. You remember the whole deal with that? Tito got to be pre-Ricky Morton. He'd get beat up.
And Putski cleaned the house.
And then Putski come in and kill everybody.
That's
there you
right.
go. Well, in the early 80s, it's Fuji and Saito. Also, can we please mention Captain Lou Albano? Please.
Absolutely.
We're talking tag teams here. Captain
Yeah.
Lou Albano, the manager of champions, the manager of tag team champions. Oh, my God. He had 1 million tag team champions. Every time there was a heel with Albano, you knew they were going to get that belt. And they all deserved it, by the way, in that
Well
time
done, sir.
period. You know. Samoans, my God. The Samoans... I mean, do I have to explain this? You know the bloodline, you know the family line, and what their seed has carried all these decades. The Samoans were absolutely the best, right there with I think they were better than Fuji and Saito personally. But we're talking two great villain tag teams. My God, they were excellent.
I waver towards Fuji and Saito.
I get it,
but
they're
Samoans
more
were
cerebral,
great.
But the Samoans were just
Absolutely.
wow, what a great gimmick. I mean, Fuji and Saito also were great. They're both amazing, Can we? I guess you could mention the Moondogs.
That's like, don't
You
pass
gotta
the
mention
Moondogs. Do
You
not
gotta
pass the-
mention the great face tag team of the early '80s with Guerrero and Mortel.
Oh, absolutely.
Guerrero and Mortel were as face as they come. The fans loved them. The girls howled. They could both wrestle. In those days, they were considered absolutely great wrestlers, for what they did. They were fantastic. Rick Martel was a star.
Just a little shout out for Putski and Santana. They held the title for 173
Yes, they
days.
did.
That's
They
a
lost it to the
long
Samoans, I think,
time.
at the Spectrum
They
or
did. They
something
lost
like
it
that.
at the Philadelphia Spectrum at a house
Boy,
show.
I'm on fire right now.
And let's not get a shout out. Let's give a shout out to the WWE at that time at the Shea Stadium show. Right?
Sure.
They put
the Samoans
Bob
versus
Backlund and Morales. And
Absolutely.
Backlund and Morales win
won
the
the belts.
tag team
I
titles.
was very excited when Backlund and Morales won the belts. The thought of people holding belts simultaneously, being multiple champions, that fascinated me. I thought that was great.
And
of course, they took the belts right off them.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You guys can't be tag champs. You got belts
And
to
they gave it
defend.
right back to Samoans.
And the Samoans wound up getting it back, and the fans were pissed.
I think
and you know who they beat? Oh, my God. I think they beat in the finals, and I don't even know how they got there. Oh, my God. I think it was Rene Goulet and I think Dominic DeNucci.
Could be.
Oh, my Lord.
Fans, please check that. That'd be fantastic.
It could
if they
be,
did.
but these are ancient memories. Bear with me, folks. It's 40 years, but I pretty much remember these things. Yeah, tag team wrestling was wonderful in the mid '80s, but then.
Well, I want to. I want to give it.
then
I want to then talk about.
it explodes.
Really important. I don't. Going to take a break after the '80s, but
All right.
couple of things.
Yeah.
Jules is coming in. Chief Jules Strongbow
Absolutely,
is coming
the
in.
Strongbow's
The
also were
Strongbow's
part of that.
big part of the
There's
80s.
no
yeah.
doubt about that. I was saving that for Jules. No disrespect, but
Absolutely.
and matter of fact, last night I watched them beat the Samoans. So that was absolutely tremendous. The Strongbows were way over. Did you hear that screaming from the fans?
Oh, absolutely.
When they won the belts?
Absolutely.
How'd you like that quick pin, too? That was great.
And
Oh,
you know,
my
look,
God.
the '80s gets. Look, there's other teams.
There is.
North-South connection. Adonis and Murdoch.
Johnny Rods and Jose Estrada.
Absolutely.
Who we saw get a tag team title shot at the Garden versus Fuji and Saito. We saw that.
U.S.
Rods and Estrada.
U.S. Express.
Of course.
Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov.
Of course.
The Dream Team, one of my favorites.
Oh, please, of course.
Guys, we're going into 10 teams. It's so hard
Yeah.
for me to
We've
bypass some of these
we're dealing
teams.
with 50 years.
But
that we're
before the
gonna try
break,
to get to the best 10.
I will say this. They didn't make our top 10,
Okay.
but I would say probably the most, to me, I don't care, 81 to 89.
Yeah.
The most important tag team match in the
personal
history of tag team wrestling. The Soul Patrol, Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas defeating the Wild Samoans.
That was
not just incredible for wrestling.
Yeah, that's one of the greatest tag team matches, moments of the decade for WWF, period.
Absolutely.
Period.
And in all of pro wrestling.
Of course it was. And it was great.
And,
I was psyched.
I actually mentioned to the Pharaoh that I thought maybe Atlas and
might get a
Atlas
sniff of the 10 greatest teams.
might get a sniff, but then Pharaoh said,
Stop giving everything away.
All right.
Maybe they made it, maybe they didn't. Stay tuned, folks.
all right, we'll be back
Did we get you?
after this commercial break with the greatest top 10 WWE, WWF, WWF Tag Team Champions.
M&J Video Games and Collectibles. Sport and non-sport cards, wrestling items, autographed items. We buy, sell, and trade. M&J Video Games and Collectibles, located at 1049 Queen Street, Southington, Connecticut. Call us at 1-860-479-9223 or 860-93-GAMES. M&J video games, and collectibles. And Nitro's Garage for all your automotive needs. Call 646-675-2349. That's 646-675-2349. For all your automotive needs, Nitro's Garage. Ask for Jack.
Jimmy, I gotta take a dump. What? No, I mean I need a dumpster.
Well, for all those needs, you need to call Big V Dumpster Rental, Long Island, New York, 631-900-DUMP.
All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast. Monty DeFaro, only seen here out of Indie Music TV. So, as we discussed in the 70s, Faro talked about the top 3 teams he thought were in the 70s. What are your top 3 teams of the 80s?
Wow. Well, we didn't get to the other half of the 80s, which is, the WrestleMania situation. And this is where tag team wrestling really takes off. You had Demolition and the Hart Foundation and the Rockers and, other teams came through too. The Brain Busters, you had all these great teams. But to me, I guess I would say that the 3 best teams of the 80s that best defined and dominated it, you have to go with the Samoans. You got to go with Demolition, in my opinion. And the third one becomes tough for me. Oh boy, that is tough. I'm going to say Hart Foundation. Okay, I'll go with that.
I want to recognize a couple again. U.S. Express. Rotundo,
Absolutely.
Right?
My
Wyndham.
God, wasn't that Sheik and Volkov with them? I mean, come on.
Let's not forget about the Colossal Connection, dude. That was a
Okay.
pretty wicked. Like we talk about super
Sure,
teams, right?
sure.
That was like a super
Sure,
team.
yeah.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
You mentioned the Brain Busters, who I thought fell flat in the WWF
Right, but they were still
at the
great.
time.
I thought they were great.
Well, you thought they were great because of the NWA. You
Yeah, that's
didn't
true,
think they
too.
were great because
Yeah,
of the WWF.
that's definitely more so than yes.
The Nasty Boys,
The Nasty Boys are freaking
LOD.
Fantastic. LOD, of course, but they fall into the Brain Busters thing with
They
me.
fell
But
flat, right?
We'll explain that more when we get to the top 10 list, I guess.
Money Inc.,
Money Inc., they really are truly one of the greatest teams in the history of the company.
Strike Force,
Strike Force is probably in the top 20 all-time of the greatest teams in the history of the company.
Natural Disasters.
Of course. Of course.
Here's an interesting thing, Farrow. I kind of forgot this, but like
What do you got?
Money Inc. Defeats Legion of Doom, right?
Right.
But they lose it to the Natural Disasters. Were the Natural Disasters faces? I don't remember them
Yeah.
being faces.
Yeah. Yeah,
They were.
Yeah, they were.
Wow.
Yeah, they were. Fans got on their side. Those big, chubby, lovable guys.
Wow.
Yeah, they were over.
That's surprising.
Yeah, well,
Very
sometimes you
surprising.
can do that stuff. They were lovable, just like Otis. He's lovable.
Well, he is
Don't you
lovable.
still love Otis? They didn't
Absolutely.
release Otis, did they?
No, they did not.
All right, that's good.
All right, 1990s, my friend. So now you get into the 1990s. Wrestling starts to fall apart in the all around.
Yeah.
Right? Early 90s,
Yeah,
wrestling gets really
by
slow.
1995, it's really starting to smell really bad. Yeah, I gotcha. Yeah, well, the 90s was like we're saying, was a little bit of a lull until we got towards the Attitude Era and things started to explode again. But in the early 90s, of course, you still had the Rockers and LOD was there, and the Steiners came for. You can't call it a cup of coffee, can you? The Steiners weren't there for a cup of coffee.
No, they weren't. They were here for a while.
You're right. They actually had a full course meal, I guess. My impressions of the early 90s with tag team wrestling seemed to fade away as I was fading away from. They were losing me with the Sergeant Slaughter Hogan program. They were starting to lose me already. So it's a little vague, but it really comes into clarity for me in the later 90s when you're talking about the Dudleys and Edge and Christian and the Hardy Boys and the New Age Outlaws and all these teams start to pop up, and then you had a huge scene going on. So the 90s was really a strange time anyway for wrestling. Wrestling took a dip and then had a huge comeback, and it almost reflects in the belts themselves. So that's my take on that. What do you want now? Maybe the greatest 3 teams of the 90s?
Well, I'm going to kind of throw that off here a little bit. I'm going to
All
ask
right.
you this question.
Okay.
Of all the tag team titles, the actual belts,
Yeah.
which were your favorites?
The physical belts
The
themselves?
physical belt,
Oh my
the
God.
look.
I'm the last guy that goes looking at toy belts to begin with. I don't I never thought of that. I guess the one that stands out the most was the ones Guerrero and Martel and the Samoans wore back in the day.
Like the old style belts. I'm in a little bit of with the circular belt, like kind of like the Intercontinental title.
I thought that the old 70s, late 70s, early 80s tag belts were great. That's my.
They have a special feel to them, right?
They looked real. They didn't look like cheap and plastic and cheesy. They looked like belts.
All right, so we're running through the 90s. I'm going to give you some teams, and I want to hear what you think of probably the top 90s teams. And again, guys, the top 90s, 80s, 70s teams may not make the top 10 list.
Right.
Shockingly enough.
This is not an easy thing to do.
Quebecers.
Sure.
1, 2, 3 Kid and Marty Jannetty.
Okay. Yeah,
Men on a Mission.
I'm not doing somersaults. What was that?
Men on a Mission?
Yeah.
Forgot about them, right?
Right. I'm not doing If you mention the Ding Dongs, I'm going to lose my shit. No Ding Dongs, or was that WCW, the Ding Dongs?
Dudes with Attitudes, Michaels and Diesel.
Right.
So let me ask you this. So we were talking about the Mega Powers.
Yeah.
Right? And Jimmy and I would...
Have we discussed the Mega Powers yet on the show?
No, not
We've been
not
talking
on the show.
about it all week.
Right.
Yeah,
so
ahead.
for my top 10 list, I kept on saying, I don't know, man. I feel like I got to put the Mega Powers there. And
like,
Jimmy was getting crazy about it.
Yeah.
But... Jimmy's like,
event.
they didn't win the tag team titles. They don't deserve.
They were put together to be broken apart to have WrestleMania 5. That's what they were there for. I don't look at them as a tag team.
But,
I looked at them as something Vince did to go to the storyline. Like you told me, they were only together for 4 months. They had one major pay-per-view with the SummerSlam thing or whatever it was, and they were done because they were destined to have a fight and go, I hate you, Hulk Hogan. That's what was supposed to happen with that.
But wouldn't Shawn Michaels...
On paper, though, I grant you, Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage, you'd be really hard-pressed to get me a better team, okay?
Very hard-pressed.
Those old schoolers, I can hear them now. Andre the Giant and Dusty Rhodes. You know what? They're not more marketable than Hulk Hogan and Randy Savage on the same team.
Maria Davis says the Can-Am Connection. Another great team.
Absolutely. Nice call there, Maria
802, the Godwins.
Yeah, sure. I remember them. Absolutely.
Look, Stinger 110 says... Guys, Mega Powers, come on. We're just talking about that, bro. Look, he's saying Mega Powers. Maybe Monty does know what he's talking about.
They're not a tag team. They were a tag team put together for a program that came to its end and was only 4 months, and it was one SummerSlam pay-per-view. That's it. That's
so
it.
Let me ask you this. Do you think two dudes with attitudes...
It's disrespectful to do that to the Samoans and the Valiants and the teams that were together for decades. No!
How about two dudes with attitudes? They were put together to break up, but they won the tag team titles twice.
Attitudes. I barely... Go on.
How could you... You can't... How could you not take that seriously?
Two dudes with attitudes.
Absolutely.
They're not at the top of my list. What can I tell you?
I'm just saying.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Here's a team that you didn't give love to.
Who?
The Smoking Guns. Oh, they won the belts a million times.
In front of you, can give love to them. I don't do the Smoking Guns.
The Smoking Guns. They were a huge tag team.
You know what I remember? I remember going for a box of Twinkies when the Smoking Guns were on. Go on.
But we're not talking about favorites. Remember that. We said that. We're not talking about favorites.
That's why I went for Twinkies. They weren't one of the best. Next.
The Body Donnas in the 90s.
All right.
Right?
Yeah, okay.
Headbangers.
Yeah, okay.
All right?
Yeah.
New Age Outlaws.
There we go. That's one of the great all-time teams. Yeah, and if you're not down with that, they've got 2 words for you. What, that wasn't over enough? They held the belts like 6 or 7 times or whatever it was.
802 Blues. Nice one here. Too cool.
Oh, sure.
Singer says good point about the Mega Powers. Yeah, it's a good point.
And I love the Mega Powers. Look again on.
But again, all I'm saying, you can't waver
the greatest pairing ever. I mean,
but you can't put 2 dudes with attitudes and say they don't matter.
I didn't say they don't matter.
You're like,
saying they don't matter.
I'm saying they matter.
You know why I go because we're talking about who we'll get to. That's why I'm going okay? There's a list of these 10 teams that we had to come down to that are not you might love them or hate them, but they deserve to be there.
We're going to get to that right after this commercial break.
Hey, tag, you're in. That's right, folks. Canine Corral for all your dog daycare and overnight care. Call 631-549-1544. That's 631-549-1544.
Do you treat your dog as part of the family? Well, so do we. So why not celebrate your pup's birthday with the ultimate party box? Check us out on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Party Pup Info, and let us make your pup's party or any celebration perfection.
Elm Logistics. For all your logistic needs, call 631-299-3595. That's 631-299-3595. Elm Global Logistics. Pride, performance, and partnerships.
All right, welcome back to Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast. Monty and Farrell, only seen here out of Indie Music TV. So again, I'm gonna start with my list, which is pretty much the same as your list. A couple of things are shuffled here.
Yeah.
But again.
This was hard.
I do.
This is really hard.
If it was my personal list.
This is not our personal list.
But if it was my personal list, the Mega Powers would be in the top 10.
Sure, I understand.
For sure.
I got you.
Rick Howard, Steiner Brothers are the best team of all time. Again, this is WWE, WWF list.
Right, and the Steiners would be in the greatest all-time top 10, especially for the work they did everywhere else. This is strictly Vince's company.
And there are questionable picks here that I really struggled with.
Yeah.
So
it wasn't easy.
My number 10 was the Hardy Boys.
Okay. Tell me why you put them at number 10.
The reason I took the Hardy Boys at number 10 is they were high flyers, tag team specialists for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But I always felt that when the Hardy Boys wrestled anybody but Edge and Christian or the Dudley Boys, there was nothing special there.
Interesting.
I just never.
But you're still acknowledging them.
I have to acknowledge them because you know what? They were tag team innovators.
Absolutely. They were
right?
great.
They were tag team innovators.
I will talk more about them if they pop up on my list, but I respect that, and I do believe they deserve a spot on the list. So that's a good job by you. My number 10. And this was one where I almost kept them off completely because I do resent the push that they've gotten, because I'm a Demolition fan and I resent the push that Vince McMahon gave them to purposely pass Demolition's reign because of the lawsuit that Demolition's been involved with on and off against Vince. So I'm going to obviously say at number 10, and I have to acknowledge it because it's wrong to not acknowledge it. They hold the record for the longest reign in 50 years of the tag titles. I'm talking about the New Day. To me, they are a faction, but this is what I was getting back to earlier, that Vince forced them into the equation. I have to acknowledge them. They were champions forever. They were champions longer than Demolition. They broke the 400 and whatever days it was, and they're the longest reigning champions now. They also, to be fair, along with the Usos, are the face of the tag team division for the last half a decade. So they have the longest reign, and they've been the face of the tag team division for many years now, and they deserve some respect. So even though I am not a fan, and I do believe Vince purposely had them break Demolition's record for whatever he's holding against Axe and Smash, the New Day is number 10.
So it's different times.
Yeah, and I have
all right,
to
it's
recognize
different
that
times.
too.
It's about selling merchandise.
Oh, they sell a ton.
Right?
You know, a ton.
I agree with you. I had a problem with the New Day also, but I put them at number 9.
Okay. So you're in the ballpark.
Your number 9.
My number 9 is the New Age Outlaws. I believe that they were pretty much the face of the tag team division as far as the markability. They weren't necessarily the best wrestlers of the bunch that came out of the Attitude Era's tag team division, but they were the ones that were, everyone had a DX Suck It shirt. Everyone. I had it. I know I had it. And I know everybody just loved to go, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, D-Generation X proudly brings to you the, whatever, how many times it was, Tag Team Champions of the World! Those guys were so freaking over. They were so over, and they held the belts like 6 times. They're to me, the marketable face of that entire era. So I do believe they deserve a spot on this list. They are the New Age Outlaws. You don't have to like them. You don't have to think that they can wrestle like other people or whatever. This was a great tag team. And
Next up, we both had the Bulldogs at number 8.
The British Bulldogs.
Personally,
now, you and I were going a little nuts.
Well,
it's funny that we wind up having them at the same spot, considering how much we argued
so,
over this.
but here's the thing. I think we argued on different ends.
Okay.
If you really look at the British Bulldogs in their tag team back of the baseball card,
Right.
they held the belts for a very short time.
Okay.
They were a very small part of that tag team division.
They were a big part, but they didn't hold the belts
Well,
as much as they probably should have.
Well, what I mean is, as a tag team, they were a very small part. What puts them in the top 10 is their influence on the industry and their style.
Absolutely.
Becoming I believe the first face tag team that Captain Lou Albano managed. Obviously Dynamite Kid was hurt. That contributed to the issue. But I literally almost left them off the list. But
I couldn't do that.
it was very difficult.
Yeah.
It was hard for me not to put them on, not to put them on a list and to take them off the list.
Right.
So I said, you know what? I can't not recognize what they have done for the industry.
Absolutely, and to this day, they're still so respected and revered. It's just, I feel that they had to have a place in there regardless. Some people would be, what are you, crazy? They're the best. And I could see why you would think that. I mean, in the ring, technically, but that's not completely what this is about at all. If it was a technical contest, of course, they're probably in the top 3, Who do we have at number 7, Mike?
So at number 7, I put Edge and Christian.
Interesting. That's what I have as well.
Exactly. Again, going back to the Intercontinental deal that we did, Edge, to me, is more of a singles guy.
Yeah.
So we said, hey, this guy was
champion.
a great Intercontinental champion. But when I think of Edge now, I think of him as world champion.
World champion.
Christian, I think, is Christian.
Tag team champion with Edge.
Exactly.
That's what I think of to this day, even though Christian's had his world titles and stuff, but I never got there with Christian. I did with Edge.
And I almost feel like Edge and Christian, the same I said about the Hardys, right? They were great with the Dudleys.
Right.
They were great with the Hardys.
Right, but
and
you
after
don't
that,
remember anything distinctive
nothing.
otherwise. But you know what, though? You can't take that away from them. This was the magic of those 3 teams. And they deserve to be given all the credit in the world, and that's why they're on this list. So, okay, it is what it is.
It is what it is.
Exactly. Who's at number 6?
Number 6, this is where we have a disparaging difference between ourselves, but
Right.
the Dudley Boys are my number 6.
I can't argue with them being on your list. Why do you place them there? Tell me how did they make your list in the first place?
Well, again, I think of the 3 teams that they're recognized with, the Hardy Boys, Edge and Christian. The Dudley Boys are the best of those teams. And the Dudleys actually had other great matches in the WWE, WWF with other teams, which I felt the other 2 didn't.
Right.
So but then again, I could not put them higher than I put them.
Right.
And again, I can understand arguing the point because if you really look at just overall tag team success,
Right. Dudleys.
the Dudleys are probably, you'd be hard to argue that they were the greatest tag team.
God, I love the Dudleys. To me are the Hanson brothers. From Slapshot. I mean, they're just in a wrestling ring. I love the Dudley Boys. Always have.
But you're number 6.
My number 6 is the Hart Foundation. And it's funny. You were sitting here mentioning about how you look at Edge, you think world champion. Look at the Hart Foundation. You got Bret Hart. He's still a world champion. You know what I mean? But there he is, as he should be. The Hart Foundation, forget it. They were absolutely great. I considered them more impactful than the British Bulldogs at the time. They were more over. I'll tell you that. That much I do remember. I thought that they were amazing, and boy, did they complement each other. They really did. You had the ultimate technician, the silent but deadly Bret Hart, and the beast, Neidhart, the loose cannon.
And I mean, don't hold
They
me
were
to it.
so
I'd have
great
to look it
together.
up. They were together for a very long
They were.
time,
They
and they
were
were,
great.
and
Truly great.
they were really,
They really were. They were great. I don't have them as high as you do, and we'll get to yours in a little bit. But you obviously have very high regard for the Hart Foundation. That's for shit sure. How about at number 5? Where do we go? Who do you got?
Okay, so I have.
Oh,
sorry, I was
look at
just
this.
messaging some of the people.
If I'm not mistaken.
Number 5, the New Age Outlaws. So this is where I totally disagreed with your list. I felt you did not give them enough credit. They were.
I thought I did.
They were they're low on your list, right? They're 9.
Yeah, but they're on my list.
Oh yeah, of
There's
course.
50 years here with 5,000 teams, and they're in the top 10.
I felt that they were the team.
They were.
In the hottest time
were.
of professional wrestling.
I agree.
And
But they had a lot of help.
Absolutely.
And that's where I don't. And the ones who were helping, I think, were superior. And that's some of them. or at least one of them.
That's a great
But
point.
we'll get to that.
That's a great point. Now
We will get to that.
you had, what did you have at number 5?
At number 5, I have the Hardy Boys because, again, this gets back to the Hardy Boys. To me, really represent a tag team. And yes, Jeff went on to be world champion and all this other stuff, but the Hardy Boys are, to me, a quintessential idea of a tag team. First of all, they're bros, okay? And that never hurts, that they're bros. Second of all, their ability in the ring is insane, and that always helps too. But the thing that I always loved the most about them is that although they went their separate ways sometimes, and although they had some individual successes, Matt had some success too. When they came back together at WrestleMania recently, when Vince brought them back, the house caved in. That was the affirmation of what I've always known. The Hardy Boys are legends. They're legends. And they didn't start out that way with me. When they started out those two skinny kids in plaid that were getting ragged all over the place. Do you remember their early days? How ragdolled they used to get?
Absolutely.
You know, they really turned into a fine wine. And I'm not even a fan of the Hardy Boys, but I understand.
Well, I could tell you,
are.
I'm not a fan of a lot of these teams.
That's
you know,
true, too.
like
That's
I said
true,
last
too.
week when we had the head-to-head with Warrior and Sting.
Right.
I was more of a Sting fan than I was a Warrior fan.
Right.
But personally, I felt, what I felt. You know what I
Right.
mean?
Sure. It's not easy. Who's
Number
at
4, I had the Wild Samoans.
Interesting. So do I. That's where I put the Samoans.
I think you can't. It's hard to argue that point.
Come on.
Were they the greatest wrestlers? No.
They didn't have to be.
Were they great on the mic? No.
They didn't have to talk.
Exactly.
They were just brutish. They just kill you. I thought that they were great. Every headbutt you see today either comes from Andre or the Samoans. Yeah. It's all there is to it. Nah,
There's so
Samoans
many
were
great comments going on right now.
Yeah.
People
It's
are
not easy.
people are
Sorry,
mentioning,
guys.
Killer Bees.
Sure. Sure, of course you can mention them. But listen to these names we're dropping in the
the
top
Beverly Brothers. But it's like such a great memory, though. These were great teams.
What, not one DOA mention? I'm offended for motorcyclists.
There was not a DOA mention.
What's going on here?
I'm glad you put them up. I forgot about
why
that.
not?
You know what the
might as
problem with
well.
the tag team division? So many teams, you can't remember them.
Right. Right.
Stinger 10, thank you for the monthly membership, buddy. I
Hey.
really appreciate that. Thanks
you.
for coming on board on Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast. I want to remind everybody after this show, we have a very rare interview with Chief Jules Strongbow.
Wow.
Going to be fun.
On the subject of tag team wrestling. Nice.
The Valiants I have is number 3.
So do I. That's interesting. Yeah, the Valiants to me are the greatest team of the 70s. They were the first one with the longest reign. Demolition broke their record.
Even Luscious Johnny?
I can't really blame him for who he was friends with.
You're right.
Be nice, but he was.
Do you think he was really friends with that guy anyway?
highly unlikely?
He probably was like, I hate this guy as much as we do.
Yeah.
The Valiants to me, I've told this story.
Yeah.
I was younger, much younger.
This
And
is great.
it's midnight, WOR.
Mm-hmm.
And me and my sister are running through the channels. My sister's, I think, 4 years
What are you,
older
like
than me.
11 back then?
Shit, I don't even remember, man.
Yeah,
But
if it's the late 70s, you probably.
all
like
I
11.
remember is you see these guys, and they have blonde hair, but I think they're women with no shirts
You
on.
thought they were girls.
Right? I'm like, what is this?
You thought they were girls.
And
The
me and my
Valiants.
sister are like, what is going on here? And then my father comes on and he goes, that's pro wrestling. And I'm like, what is that?
Yeah, what am I looking at?
What am I looking at?
Right.
And
Blonde-haired girls with no shirts on. That's what you thought you were looking at.
what were your memories?
It's a hell of a first impression.
What were your memories of the Valiants?
Well, the Valiants, I had heard from my neighbor's dad, who was talking to my dad in the barbecue background of 1978. The Yankees were on their way to a second world title. The Bee Gees were playing I remember everything.
Yeah.
And he brought up pro wrestling, and my father started talking about the Gorgeous George days, and he dropped the Valiants. He goes, have you seen the Valiants? And my father was like, no, who's that? He goes, oh, these crazy guys. They're like long blonde haired, like rebel kind of guys. They're bad guys. They're great. And my little friend who I hung out with at the time, he turns to me, he goes, I love the Valiants, and George Steele too. He's got a green tongue. It's like, these were my first impressions. I saw the Valiants over at his house because he had.
Let me ask you this. So a lot of times when you were tag team champion back then,
Yeah.
You had also, major singles matches. Like,
Sure.
remember the Samoans used to wrestle Backlund at the Garden?
Both got a shot
You know
at
what I mean?
back.
Did the-
Fuji got a shot.
So let me ask you this. Did the
Backlund.
Valiants get shots at San Martino?
Most likely, I would think so.
Okay. I didn't know if you had remembered that.
I
or-
don't remember, but I'm pretty sure Johnny got a shot or two. Probably not from any help from his friends, but he probably got a shot.
All right, number 2 was very difficult for me because they are my favorite tag team of all time.
How dare you?
Demolition,
How
I put it number 2.
dare you? How
This
could you?
I just
Interesting.
I
Okay, all right.
didn't
Well,
have a choice.
You know what? Say nice things about the team we both love. Go ahead at number 2, Demolition, who we've had in studio and great
Demolition
guys.
were the perfect, and we had them in studio. Great people, like you said. Their music
Oh, God.
was killer.
Of course it was.
I remember when they first came out. I was in the military, and the
was
first
great.
I saw an article. I was in Germany. Okay, and Demolition were debuted, and I'm sure I'm right about this, at the Meadowlands. It was a tag team tournament.
Okay.
And the winner got a tag team title.
All right.
And I remember there was a picture of Demolition, and I think it was Moondog King. Was it Moondog King?
Okay.
Rex was the other Demolition guy. I was like, what a joke. LOD ripoffs. So,
Right.
Road Warrior ripoffs.
Right.
But as things went on, they got their music, and boy, did I love Demolition. And so many great moments, being a heel team, turning face.
That was great, too.
Turning heel.
What about at the Rumble where they beat the hell out of each other?
I was going to say that.
It's one of the best moments
Wow.
ever.
And again, when Andre comes in and they just go back to normal, whew.
Do you know what I remember the most, though? The first time they were over, they came out, and it was at the Garden. I do remember this. And
Go ahead.
They came out, and the music was playing, and they turned and they looked at the crowd, and they took off the veils. You know how they had their faces covered?
Yeah.
They ripped them off, and there was the face paint. And, dude, the place went nuts.
Absolutely.
And they were like, ooh, when you saw them, it was just, they were so Road Warrior. You had to be back in that time period to fully grasp just how heavy metal and just how Road Warrior cool. I'm referring to Gibson's movies back in the 80s. That's how cool Demolition was. They were so freaking cool. And they were a great team. They had great chemistry. And they had the longest reign for decades and decades until Vince decided to put it on the new date.
Again, some other great names coming
just
out here,
to spite
guys.
them, in my opinion. But
APA, Power and Glory. Again, Power and Glory didn't win the
was
belt. So
flipping great.
they were awesome.
Damn! They were great. I loved their backstage vignettes where they were drinking. Oh, my God. APA was excellent. Excellent.
Yeah.
You know who's nobody's mentioning? I'm surprised. Anybody remember the Un-Americans?
The Un-Americans.
The Un-Americans were irritating as shit with Storm, Christian, and Test. They were irritating as shit.
It's amazing how great this tag team division
There's been
is.
a lot of great teams over
You
the
had the
years.
Dudley Boys at number 2.
Yes, I did.
Tell me why.
I would have put them at number 1, but I'll save my number 1 from when I shortly get there. The Dudley Boys, to me, are, as I said before, the Hansons from Slapshot, but they're also so much more than that. They have beautiful chemistry. They always did. They could have great matches, like you said, with multiple different teams.
Yes.
Doesn't matter what style, the Dudleys will do it. The Dudleys were legitimately tough. As they were coming up, they were tough teams that were testing them physically, and they were like, they'd go to the back and go, oh, crap, those guys give as good as they get.
Yeah.
The Dudley Boys, to me, are tag team wrestling just in general. And what a great gimmick. You guys looking at them at home? They're brothers. It's hilarious, the fact that they made, oh, he's my brother. This is my brother, Devon. It's just everything they did was great, and it was very Slapshot great.
It's funny how that goes because I remember when they first came, I always liked the stuttering, Bubba Ray Dudley.
That was great.
And, I did, but then he went
That
away
was
from it. I
great.
guess he didn't want to do it anymore.
Right.
And,
Well, he moved on to
802
other
says
things
the
before.
Orient Express, dude.
Sure, Pat
Pat
Tanaka's one of our
Tanaka
boys.
and
We
Paul
love Pat
Diamond,
Tanaka.
man. What a great
Absolutely.
team. All right, guys, we're at
Absolutely.
the end here. I'm giving my number 1. Farrell will give his number 1.
All right.
My number 1, again, not a fan of the team, but I don't think it's very hard to argue this. The Hart Foundation.
Interesting.
They
Interesting.
were innovative before innovation.
Okay.
They had their moves. They looked great together. They could wrestle with everyone. You had the power and then you had the
Yeah.
artist
Yeah.
in Bret Hart. Jim Neidhart was the power.
Yep. Yeah, as far as balance goes on this list of our, and we have them both on our list, that is the most balanced team on the list.
Again, the problem is Bret Hart
finesse
became
guy, a power guy.
a great intercontinental champion, a great world champion. So,
Right.
but again, the Hart Foundation. Listen, I remember the Hart Foundation as much as I hated them when Demolition became again another faction. Mm-hmm. Okay,
Right.
they were a faction.
Clutch. Yeah, that was right.
When
Right.
when they had that SummerSlam match at the end when Demolition was being phased out and LOD came out and helped the Hart Foundation win the belt, there was no way I thought the Hart Foundation was going to beat Demolition. I was like, they can't do this. I don't know, man. As shocking as it is to me, the Hart Foundation is the greatest WWE tag team champion.
Well, Ed Farrell's number one, and I'm sure it won't be a surprise to too many people. I have Demolition. There's a reason why that record stood for around 30 years. That record stood, okay? It was their shoulders, whether it was merchandise back in those days or whether it was main event matches during the early days of WrestleMania. It was their shoulders that was placed upon, and boy, did they deliver, okay? They also had to always deal with being in the shadow of the Road Warriors, but those of us who watched WWF back in those days, we knew exactly what they were.
Well, they were
nothing.
our Road Warriors. They were our Road Warriors.
Like the Road Warriors. Nothing. They just happened to be two big dudes with face paint. Are we really that simple that we couldn't tell the awesome dynamic differences between, in my opinion, the two greatest teams of all time? So it's not like I'm discrediting the world. If the Road Warriors, if this had been a greatest team of all time list, I've got the Road Warriors at number one.
I'm going to disagree with you.
You got to be historically ignorant.
I'm going to disagree with you on that one point.
What's that?
There's no doubt that Demolition
There's no
was...
doubt Vince wanted to create something in that image.
Hold on. There's
got
no
that.
doubt he brought them in to make his own Road Warriors.
There's no doubt. Not
I
saying
think
that.
in his mind, that's what he wanted to do.
Right.
I don't even think Vince McMahon Jr., as great and brilliant as he is, realized that Demolition
would work that way.
will end up becoming what they became.
Right.
So yes,
Right.
they, when we had Demolition here, they said we didn't even. No, you knew what you were doing. You knew what you were being brought in for.
Right.
I totally disagreed with them. I thought they weren't telling the truth.
But they weren't trying to imitate them. They didn't wrestle like them at all. They didn't.
I
behave like them.
think is what they
behaved
wanted
like
to
them.
become the WWE's Road Warriors, but
Right.
it grew legs on its own.
It sure did.
And you're right.
It
They
sure did.
didn't wrestle like LOD.
No.
It was a totally different
They had
animal.
a different vibe.
But
quite honestly,
I don't want to. I don't want to. Insult
don't forget, you have them at number
fans'
2,
intelligence.
So it's not like
I'm a huge Demolition guy. You know that.
Absolutely.
But again,
you know what? It's not about insulting fans' intelligence when you bring up the Road Warriors to me. Everybody knew that they were supposed to be like a Road Warriors. I'm pointing out the thing that no one ever says or has the balls to say. They were completely different. And they were completely different. And when I watched them, I didn't get the same feel I got as watching the Road Warriors. They had their own distinctive, awesome it factor, and they were great. And that's why they held the belt for that long. And that's why the record stood for decades and decades and decades.
Again, that's why it didn't take off well in the beginning, because they were Road Warrior knockoffs that grew into their own.
Right.
So yes, you're 100% right.
I love
but
them
let's not turn around and say that they weren't Road Warrior knockoffs.
Who's saying that?
I'm just saying, they didn't start off going, hey, this isn't the Road Warriors.
Right.
This is the Road Warriors. And then it became, hey, guess what? This is Demolition.
Yeah, no kidding.
Right? This is now Demolition.
And someone should cut a check to Rick Derringer, whoever it was, whether it was JJ or whoever it was that came up with the freaking riff for that.
JJ McGuire, friend of the show.
Somebody could have checked to JJ,
All right, with that, you've been watching Long Island's #1 pro wrestling broadcast, Monty and the Pharaoh, only seen here at Indie Music TV. We'll be on next in a very rare interview with WWE legend Chief J Strongbow in, I think, about 20 minutes. We're looking forward to that. Pharaoh, any final words on the show?
Well, folks, as you're probably pulling out your hair, some of you, because we didn't mention your favorite team, just understand that this was a seriously hard thing to do. I hope you enjoyed it. We had to comb over 50 years of all the all-time greats, but I think we were historically responsible at the end of the day. So it is what it is.
Gregory Krug says out there he liked Bill Eadie better as a Masked Superstar. Bro, I loved Masked Superstar
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
That was tough for me too. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
look, like you said, it's very tough. You have people, teams, or wrestlers that are your favorites.
Sure.
But if you want to be, like you
Objective.
said, objective
Yeah.
and responsible, I believe this is a responsible list.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same list. It's just like, where
Just
did you
wanted
put
to-
the
yeah,
square
just-
peg in the square hole
Right.
or whatever? You know what I mean?
And it's not surprising we came up with basically the same teams. These are the great teams.
All right, well, we're looking forward to everybody joining us in about 20 minutes. This is Mike Monty.
This is the Pharaoh, and until a couple of seconds from now, later.